This meeting is being recorded.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Higher Moment Mastermind. Delighted to have you with us on this Friday, chilly Friday morning here in DC. We got yet another bout of snow, so that was fun. It's pretty out there. I'm Shira Lotzar and happy to be your host today, joined by Vern Schallinger. And we're both happy to answer your job search questions. And actually, I had a person who shared a few questions in advance. So I'd like to handle them first. And then we'll go ahead and take other questions. Okay, so the first question is target companies. How can you figure out what companies or organizations you want to target if you're not sure what you want to do? Obviously, this is a very tricky question because the real answer is you got to figure out what you want to do. I mean, I don't mean to be Captain Obvious about that, but at the end of the day, you know, you can only apply to jobs that make sense for both what you want to do and what the organization needs you to do. Now, as you know, I'm constantly saying this, right? And in fact, you could probably fill in the blank for those who've been on this call for a long time. Employers are always looking to, ready? Minimize their risk, okay? This is the theme. We always talk about that. And what that means as it relates to your target search is this. Beyond figuring out what you want to do, especially for those people who are trying to do any sort of career changing, it can be especially difficult because employers in their attempt to minimize their risk really want what they want, right? They want the unicorn candidate. They want somebody who's been there, done that. So if you at all are open to doing what you've done in the past, and I know that's like for a lot of you, but at least something that's very, very similar, it's going to be a lot easier to land because employers can only hire one person, right? They have these pretty straight requirements. They say, we want you to know how to do these skills and have this kind of background. And every time you diverge from that and you try to do something different, it makes them feel a little bit risky, a little bit shaky. I'm not saying it's impossible to get a job outside of what you've done before. People do it all the time, but it takes a lot of intention. You really do have to know what you want to do, right? And number two, you need to be able to customize your resume and tailor it so that it matches the requirements. So for example, if you, I'll make this up. Let's say a person comes from a background in, I don't know, like operations or something like that. And part of their job was meeting planning. And let's say this person decided, hey, I really want to become a meeting planner. Okay. Not just have done meeting planning, but really become a meeting planner. So in that particular case, I would highly recommend that you take those meeting planning accomplishments and highlight them. Label them across the resume. Say aspiring meeting planner, make meeting planning the theme of the resume, make meeting planning the theme of your LinkedIn profile so that when employers look at your resume, they see that as the brand, right? So they say, oh, this person's less of a risk because they're actually highlighting the skills that show us that they know what they're doing. Even though you weren't a meeting planner in the past, you've done meeting planning. And there's a little phrase I have around that. I call it ing versus So the ing is the skill, the is the profession. So writing is different than writer, event planning, event planner, accounting, accountant, that kind of thing. And so if you have some ing skills in your background that you want to repurpose into an profession, go ahead and highlight those on your resume and LinkedIn. But as far as figuring out what you want to do, there is an exercise that I think I've mentioned this in the past, and it's an exercise that I developed called, I repurposed something else and created this thing that I call Passiontivity. And Passiontivity is an exercise that can help you figure out what you want to do, okay? And so the idea here is that it looks at your skills as they align with your career motivators. And so what you do here is that you do a four quadrant box with motivation and skill: high motivation, low motivation, high skill, and low skill. And so first of all, you want to be listing out in this upper right-hand box, what I call the high engagement box, skills that you are terrific at and you also love to do. You're great at it and you love to do it. So this is what gives you joy in your work. Again, I call it, you're a highly engaged employee. Wild horses can't drag you away from this work. The bottom right is high skill, low motivation, which is stopgap work, meaning work that you're perfectly good at, but you tolerate it, right? So it's not anything that you really want to do. I mean, you'll do it if you have to, but it's certainly not something that you want to pursue. And then professional development is the third box, high motivation, low skill. And there are two sub boxes here, want to and need to, meaning these are the skills. The want to would be things that you would love to be better at. And then the other one is things you need to, meaning you should be better at. For example, let's say you were a marketing professional. You might say that you want to, or you'd love to be better at social media strategy. That would make sense. But a lot of marketing people aren't very good with numbers. So the person might say, I need to be better managing budgets. Okay, so this is an area where you can think about where you want to grow. And then low skill, low motivation is disengagement, right? Things that you are, that absolutely drain you. And the why I share this with people just in general, just in terms of figuring out your brand, but especially for people who don't know what they want to do, it's really, really helpful to focus here on this high engagement quadrant. Because if you can list out the skills that you are great at and you love, if you need to repurpose into a new career, this is the box that'll show you how to do that. So for example, going back to that operations person, likely that person would have put meeting planning in the high engagement box. And what you do then is if you list out a bunch of skills, 4, 5, 6, 7 skills in there, and you notice that there's 1 or 2 skills, let's say, that pop off the page to you, meaning you are just so thrilled to do that work, you could see yourself doing it full time, that might be the ing to the So if meeting planning was in that list for that person, that ing skill, and this person said, hey, I really want to do this full time, then they would be rebranding into the meeting planner. Okay, so hopefully that helps. Does that make sense, guys? Okay, so that's the first. That was the first question. The second question that I got was about honesty, and I loved Vern to chime in on this one as well. How honest should you be about yourself during an interview? I believe in being as honest as possible, but where do you draw the line in honesty? Well, first of all, that is, and actually, Sonia, I'd like for you to chime in too, since you're in HR. That's a very broad question, because honest about what, right? So there are different kinds of questions that might come up around, honesty. Look, at the end of the day, yes, it is obviously important to be honest. It's important to be accurate. That said, there are certain things that are just not as appropriate as others to talk about in an interview. For example, if you had a not great experience at your last employer, what you don't want to be doing is throwing your past employer under the bus. No one wants that, right? It almost sounds a little, it's not gossip, obviously, but it's almost in that vein, right? Where you are saying something that puts somebody in a bad light. Okay, not that's not true. It was honest. It was your experience. But if you do that, then the employer is going to think, oh, and if he or she leaves our job, then how are they going to be talking about us, right? Nobody wants to feel exposed like that. So that's one of those areas that you'd want to be a little more deferential and be thinking about a way to frame how you left that organization as a little bit more positive, to say, oh, I moved on because I was seeking something that was more, and then say something positive, an organization, a role that was more aligned with my skill set, or that kind of thing. But you don't want to talk badly about a boss, talk badly about their culture, that kind of thing you want to stay away from. So that's my one little tip. Vern, do you want to share another? And then maybe Sonia?
Yeah, I guess the other thing to say is, be as honest as possible, but don't necessarily volunteer information that could potentially hurt you from getting the job. That's just kind of a guideline to go by. I know I made the mistake that Shira just mentioned early in my career. I had a very short tenure at an organization and I was fired. And so now I'm interviewing for a new job. And they said, well, what happened? Right. And I said, I took this position. I thought the person that interviewed me, my future boss, we seemed pretty compatible. And once I got on the job, it wasn't that way. We had different viewpoints. We had different ideas about how to do things. And the whole entire year was really difficult. And the culture didn't really match my values. And so I was fired. And I look back on that and I said, no, should I really have said that during the interview, giving that much detail? Luckily, I actually still got that offer and got that job. But as Shira said in the beginning, it's not a black and white, you go to this point and don't say anything beyond that, because it's so there's so many different things that could come up in an interview that might speak to your honesty. Yeah. About whatever the issue is.
Yeah, framing things, again, aspirationally, it's that whole glass half empty, glass half full thing. So it's like, you know, rather than focusing on what you don't want or what didn't work, focus on what you do want and what does work. It's the same thing. It's just the opposite side of the pancake. Just frame it in a positive way.
Yeah.
Sonia, do you want to say something?
Sure. I say less is better. The less details, the better. I wouldn't get into detail, especially if it was a conflict in personality and all that. I wouldn't get into the details. I wouldn't get into anything personal. Like some people, you know, they may have just come out of a health scare or something and they want to talk about it. You shouldn't be talking about that. Talk about the job, what you can do,
Yes.
what you can bring to the table.
That's right.
And stay focused on that. But if it's something negative, like I say, less is better. Just say, well, it just didn't work out for me.
Yeah. And what
In
you
the
don't,
conversation.
exactly. And this goes to both your interviews as well as any networking opportunities. You want to keep everything as much as possible in the positive. You don't want to be a complainer. You don't want to be saying, oh, woe is me on this and that, and I can't believe da 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 happened, and you know, anything like that. Because remember, they're evaluating your, it's not even just about them, they're evaluating your personality. They're evaluating your culture fit. Are you going to be a negative Nelly when you come into the office? Are you going to be, oh, woe is me, and you know, kind of an Eeyore, you know, like tail between your legs? Or are you going to be someone who's going to be uplifting and positive and joyful and add to the culture, right? Rather than detract. So that's, yeah.
You do have to be careful because when you chat, when you become a chatty Cathy,
Yeah.
you have a tendency to take it before you know it. You've taken it somewhere you didn't intend for it to go.
That's exactly right. That's right. Yeah. So try to and that's the other thing, give some detail, but not too much detail. Right. Yeah. Eric.
It's just quoting something that Kevin Conopy often says that in his interview group, practice group, don't answer questions that they didn't ask.
Yeah.
Because you're answering something that wasn't asked. It's like you're adding detail that shouldn't be there.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, and the reverse is also true. Answer the question that they are asking.
Yes.
Right. I say that too, because a lot of times we don't. A lot of times we hear the question, but we don't really hear the question. We answer what we want to hear. It's kind of like a politician staying on message. The journalist asks the question, like when then they say something completely different because they want to stay on message because their PR person told them to do that. You don't want to do that in an interview. When the employer asks this question, address it directly, and also be thinking about addressing it in a way that speaks to your ability to do that job. I'll give you an example. One of the questions that some employers ask, it's very generic. It's like, what is your greatest accomplishment? Well, there are lots of ways you can answer that. You know, some people might answer that personally. Oh, my kids. Or, I mean, I'm sure, yes, I mean, it's lovely, right? That's not relevant to the job.
Right.
But more importantly, some people will actually go into an accomplishment story that has nothing to do with the job, and it causes brand confusion. I know there's just one example I give all the time. It's just, I always remember it. It happened like 20 years ago, but I always remember this. This employer was trying to interview a candidate for an executive assistant role and asked the candidate, what's your greatest accomplishment? And the candidate proceeded to go into the story about this amazing conference that she planned, and big thing. I mean, it was really big accomplishment, absolutely, but had nothing to do with being an executive assistant. And so the employer screened her out because it made the employer think that she wanted to be a meeting planner and not an EA. Okay. So I say that because you got to be really careful when you are talking about your story. So you've got to have, when you are preparing your interview stories for a job, which you should always have interview accomplishment stories prepared. You know, situation, action, result. That's one of the formula. People have different ones. People call it SAR, STAR, PAR, CAR. It's all the same stuff. It's tell the situation, tell what you did, what the action was, and then share the result. But when you're coming up with those stories, you need to know those stories well enough so that whenever a question comes at you, you maybe can use that story, but give a certain lens on that story, right? So maybe the question was about your conflict resolution skills or your team building skills or something like that. Try to be thinking of stories where you can pull out different aspects of your skill set, right? But make sure that you're addressing what they are asking. Fern, did you have anything to share about that?
The other thing to Cher's point about make sure you answer the question, you know, do not be afraid to, you know, if you get a question, say, can you help me understand a little bit more about, what you're looking for here? Or if you don't understand the question, ask a clarifying question. So make sure if it's not, I mean, a lot of questions in the interview are pretty straightforward, and you know what they're asking for, and you answer the question, but don't hesitate to ask the interviewer if you need more information or clarification about, what
Yes.
are they're really asking here.
That's right. Absolutely. And by the way, not only is that a good way to make sure that you're answering the question, it actually buys you a little time. Because
Yes,
if you ask them to paraphrase back, you're thinking, right?
Yes.
So
Exactly.
it gives you an extra minute.
Especially when it's a question that throws you, right?
Yeah,
You know,
that's right.
wow, that's an interesting question.
Right?
Let me
You pause. Let me think about that in a second. Well, and you can say, well, do you want me to answer this part of this question this way or that way, or just get them to talk a little bit more? Can you elaborate a little bit more on the question? Can you share me the backstory of the question, how that question relates to the role? I want to make sure I'm answering it thoughtfully. You can get them talking a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. All right. And then the third question has to do with diversity. This is a subject that is very dicey to discuss, but needs to be addressed. Diversity. Why is it that employers only look at diversity when it comes to race and gender orientation / identification? Have they not heard of diversity because of age or ability or disability? Yes, this is a very sensitive question. I appreciate the question, especially right now. And here's what I will very humbly proffer. Okay. I am on a learning journey like everyone in here. Okay. When it comes to this particular topic. So this is my particular lens on this as it relates to being a recruiter and a coach and speaking with HR people and actually dabbling in diversity, equity, and inclusion and doing a little bit of work around that. So that's my background to answering this. So here's what I would suggest. The topic of diversity, and again, some people call it diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is a broader concept, but we'll just address diversity right here, is one that has been evolving for many, many years, many, many years. I mean, ever since the civil rights movement, and of course, even long before that too, right? So, but in terms of the workplace, it's really been the last, 40, 50, kind of years, we've been talking more and more about it. And of course, the diversity concept has, in the last number of years has taken root, and certainly since last summer with George Floyd, we are seeing much more discussion about this. And because of last summer, and not just because of last summer, but certainly the racial injustice that we've seen in this country, there are many employers that are are particularly focused on creating equity in that dimension, and the other areas in terms of orientation. And there's reasons for that. And the fact is that we have sort of these waves, right? So many years ago, back in the 70s and 80s, it was gender, it was women, right? That was the topic that people were talking about, creating equity for women in particular. For a number of years, about a dozen or so, and I know because I did a lot of speaking on this, it was generational diversity. Everybody was talking about the boomers and the millennials. Okay, you see where I'm going with this. So we have these waves where people are getting more and more aware of different aspects of our diverse identities, okay? And I'm sure that's going to change as well. And actually, to this person's point about abilities and age, actually, there are more employers that actually are talking about this. You don't even realize it. It's not in the news right yet. It's not a forefront thing, but I'm aware of it. In fact, I know in particular because I've given, one presentation, and I think I'm about to do another right now, like in the last month, actually on age diversity, where specifically not generational, just age, where a couple of groups have asked me to speak on how to retain an aging workforce or how to navigate, the aging workforce. So I'm already seeing a little bit more talk about that, and disabilities, and look, there's lots and lots and lots and lots of areas of diversity that we could cover. Those are some. I'm hearing, little musings about it, not just disabilities, but neurodiversity and different, in diversity, equity, and inclusion circles. There has been chatter about that, right? And people are trying to expand the lens and say, hey, just like this person's question, it's not just about race, it's also about this, and also this, and also. So I'd say right now we're in a wave where I think those particular topics are more at the forefront, and that's good. And to this person's point, there are other areas where I think as we go on in our societal evolution, that those kinds of topics are going to be, coming to the forefront. In fact, you can even see commercials now. I've been really, because I have that lens, that diversity lens, I've been noticing that there are people with different, I know that this is, people use different terms. Some people say special needs, some people say people with different abilities, but, people who are, maybe have some disabilities are actually being focused now in commercials, in certain kinds of programming, right? So you see an H and, like you're seeing a little difference. I would suspect that probably in the next, I can't predict exactly, probably in the next year or two, we'll probably start to see that the lens expand. So that's my particular, viewpoint on this. I'm sure lots of people have different ones. So that's what I would say. That if anyone else who on this call, anyone here has some interest, knowledge, or perspective to share, I would be happy to hear it as well. How about Kimberly and then Sonia?
Good morning, everyone. So one of the things that has kind of come to the forefront has more to do with appearance. There's a legislation called the Crown Act, and it's around natural hair. There have been mostly women of color who wear their hair naturally, and it's created issues for them in some cases, in hiring practices and the ability to be promoted. So, you think about it, we're in 2022 and we actually have to have legislation around how someone wears their hair. But it's real, and I know it's in effect in Maryland and in DC. I'm not sure about Virginia, to be honest with you. But that's one of the things when you look at diversity, something that seems really simple. And I was reading a statistic, I think it said 80% of women of color have felt the need to change their hair to fit into a corporate structure. And at one point I was at that point where I felt pressured to wear my hair differently. And I'm like, what does it have to do with my ability? But that's just, when you think about diversity, that's just something else to think about.
Yeah, it's interesting how we get into a and in groups, we tend to do that. We get into conformist culture, whatever that means, whatever, conforming to whatever. Like, you're not going to come to an interview in a ball gown, right? It's just not appropriate. You dress, you dress appropriately, right? And so, but back in the day, it was, I remember when law firms in DC were like to me, the last group that actually stopped requiring women at many years ago, like in the 90s, to not wear hose and closed-toed shoes and all the other companies were already beyond that, but law firms, no, you had to and skirts and all these things. So no, yes, and this is one more area, Kimberly, you're right, that needs to change. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Sonia?
Okay, I have 2 points. First, I want to talk about Kimberly, what Kimberly said. It's true. I remember in the 80s, I was working with a recruiter, and this was the time when Black women had what we called the Jerry curl. You all remember that? The curly perm? And I was told to get rid of that and straighten it out in order to go forward with the hiring. I didn't understand it at the time. And no, I didn't get rid of my Jerry curl, and I got a job. But that was the big thing back there. So when I saw the new laws changing for that, I kind of gave a clap to it, because that has nothing to do with your capabilities. I've always been on the corporate staff, even when I first got into HR. So it is what it is. But the second point I was gonna make is something you said, Shira. We've always had diversity. We just didn't call it that.
Right.
Because I'm a GovCon person, and most of my career has been somewhere in the GovCon industry, be it defense or federal or whatever. But we've always had women, we've had race, we've had age. Remember, we had this thing over 40. You had to have people over 40. We've always had I think that was That
I
was
thought, are
about
you talking
it.
about the OFCCP guidelines?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
OFCCP
Yes.
guidelines are ones
They-
where,
yeah.
like government contractors have to abide by certain government
Right.
requirements. I thought people with disabilities were included in that.
They were.
Military as well.
Yeah, you had to prove why, if you're a GovCon, why you didn't, and you get audited. Why, if this person had the skill set, but they were different. I'll say that you had to prove why you didn't hire them versus the person that had everything together. But like I say, they've changed that now, and then now they've added more to it. The LBGQ and the other pieces that Shara mentioned. And so to me, it's the same thing. You just add into it, and you still have to go forth. The only thing that I find a little puzzling is, how do you tell on the LGBT, unless you ask, and you cannot ask that in an
And
interview.
disabilities, you can't ask because.
Yeah, you can't, and that's right. That's right. Some disabilities are not seen.
No.
You know, if someone has diabetes, you may not be able to see that.
No.
But you are accountable as a company to adhere to those guidelines.
Yes.
So on the HR side, it is difficult, but not impossible. And that's my take on that diversity thing. I'm always aware of it, and I try to blend it throughout the company I work for. And I have justification because my focus is, can you do the job? That's where I am with it. Personality counts too, because there's no sense in putting people in a no-win situation. But the diversity part, it adds to it. So we got a tough thing on our hands, but we have to do it. That's our role. That's what we're supposed to do.
Yep. To be
Yeah,
as respectful to people as possible. Vern?
Yeah, the other aspect of diversity as a job seeker is understanding the culture of the organization. And cultures, some cultures say diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? They say that's what they want. But if you look at the mix of people there or their practices, they don't actually abide by it. There's a phrase that I once heard. It said, diversity is being invited to the dance.
Yes.
Inclusion is actually being asked to dance, right?
That's
So we
right.
can hire people of different races, different backgrounds, different skills, different ages. And we can put them in roles, but they're not really, roles that are really contributing that much to the organization or giving them opportunities to be promoted and that type of thing. So the culture is so critical, and it's one of those things in my mind where, I mean, the studies, the research, the neuroscience has proven over and over again that the more diversity you have on a team, the greater output, the greater productivity, the greater innovation, and companies still seem to. I think it's better. I think it's good that this is such a topic that's being discussed more and more, and some companies are actually trying to really include, people of regardless of your age, regardless of your race, regardless of your disability. Gay, lesbian, whatever it is, they're trying to build a workforce around that. But again, I think there needs to be a lot more companies with that kind of mindset and that kind of culture.
Yeah, there's this balance here between employers who are trying not to discriminate versus employers who are trying to proactively include.
Right. Yeah.
Because all the discrimination, EEOC, Title VII, which talks about all the protected classes, age, race, creed, color, sex, national origin, so forth and so forth and so on. Right? We keep adding to that, but that was the original. That was designed to not discriminate. Don't not hire somebody because of their right? Now we're in a place where employers are trying to go beyond that to, I don't want to just not discriminate. I want to proactively seek out, look for people who are different than mainstream. So people have different phrases for that, but right. But people who maybe are in protected classes, and see if we can actively include them in our hiring mix. And there's a concept called the Rooney Rule. It came from NFL football. That basically is that the Rooney Rule specifically had to do with making sure, if I'm going to say this correctly, I don't want to misspeak here, but you can look it up. That when hiring NFL coaches, they had to make sure that at least, I think I'm saying this correctly, I think at least 3 were people of color, I think. But some employers have taken that for their own practices, just making sure. I had a search a few months back where the employer was extremely intentional about that. They had the very same Rooney Rule. I think in their case, it was 2 or 3 people of color had to be part of the hiring mix. And I had to go out and source, from very diverse pools of candidates to make sure that we did that. And so there's definitely companies that are out there who are trying to be extra inclusive around, certain kinds of backgrounds. So it's a moving target. It's changing all the time. We'll have this conversation today, and a year from now, it might sound very different. I appreciate the question though that the person asked, because it's a sensitive topic and one that needs to be addressed. And HR people need to be constantly addressing this. And some are really involved in that conversation. So it's all important stuff. All right. So those were the 3 questions that this person posed, and it turned out to be a pretty rich discussion. So thanks for those of you who chimed in. All right, so let's go. Oh, before we keep going on, we had some chat box here. So Will said, how do you handle asking about disabilities on the online application? That's a great question. I don't think I have an actual answer for that, because to Sonia's point, because the Americans with Disabilities Act, you do not have to share about a disability. In fact, it had been a time when if you did, you could really be discriminated, even if the person didn't want you to be. And now, as Sonia's mentioning now, like at GovCon, it's, oh, well, we want to know. Not everybody wants to know. It's a very dicey one. I don't even really know how to answer that. Sonia, Vern, do you have an answer for that?
It's just, maybe I need to clarify the question.
Well, let me say what I'm struggling with here is when you get to that question and it says, do you have a disability? Right? Then they have a broad definition, and then they get specific. They have a whole list of things. Mm-hmm. And as you've said, there are some, like, if you don't have like a missing arm or something like that, but if you have a disability that you can't see, then it's like, okay, well, that's not going to interfere. I don't think it's going to interfere with my work. So if you say no, and what you have is on their list, have you legally lied on the application, and do they have terms to fire you? If you say, I don't want to answer, then there's put up a red flag when they hire you to look out for something,
I don't know about, look, people are people. I can't speak for the person who's reading the application. It's not supposed to be that way, right? Mm-hmm. It's supposed to be, you are protected and you have you've every right not to share it, and that's it. But look, all of these things are very, very sensitive and very dicey. Mm-hmm. And you've got to make a decision for yourself, I guess is the point. It's a personal choice. You certainly do not have to answer the question, and and you just go from there. But I don't think anybody can really give like a definitive, because we're dealing with people, not robots, Yeah.
People
have unique.
Because in the workforce, I've worked with people who have high blood pressure or, something that now it's on the disability list, and they're like, well, I'm not disabled,
Yeah.
I can come in and do my job, Yeah. But I know, like with truck drivers, for example, if you have a certain blood pressure or something, you're out, and airline pilots, I think too, because of blood pressure, they want to make sure that there's no stroke or heart attack or something when you're operating a plane or a truck.
Right.
But anyway, I just found it interesting that as years go by, employers are getting more and more specific about what they want to find out about you.
Yeah.
And it's kind of scary, because are they going to legally hold it against me if I don't answer it right?
Well, legally they can't hold it against you. That I can say. If anybody ever did, you have grounds to sue. No, I can't imagine why they would, but but quite the opposite. The reason why they're asking often is to Sonia's point, right? Because they want to make sure that they're checking their boxes and they're hiring people from a diverse spectrum.
Mm.
But if they
Well,
ask you and you tell them and then they use it against you, that's illegal.
Yeah.
And
So,
then
so their argument could be, well, if you have one of these things on the list, which years ago nobody would think about,
Right.
and you say, yes, I have a disability, and then, oh, we can show the government we have stats of we have more disabled people. You know, so I mean, I guess that's the approach they're taking,
Yeah,
that you're helping them out by sharing.
that's, I think, why they're asking.
Yeah,
But
well, maybe,
and
maybe,
to-
maybe it's not more, Will, but it's, okay, we do want to proactively hire people who are qualified to do the jobs that have a disability. And
Right.
so the fact that somebody identifies that, then as long as the rest of the resume shows that you have the skills, that may actually get you the interview. Right? So,
It's,
but again,
it's that inclusion thing, right? And actually, to Scott's question about, hiring based on skin color, look, that is a very, very dicey road. And in the diversity world, people talk about that. That, the flip side is that, oh, we're now discriminating in the other way because we're, discriminating, some people call it reverse discrimination. I think there's different terms for it. We're not hiring somebody else because we are hiring somebody, trying to look for somebody who's a particular fill in the blank. And it is a very slippery slope. But it is absolutely illegal to screen anybody out because of any thing about, their any kind of protected class, including people who are Caucasian and all of that. But at the same time, in the spirit of equity, there are employers who are saying, look, we want to make sure that we have the most diverse candidate pool as possible, that we are not only just going after people who we, who walk like us, talk like us, think like us, all of that. We want to make sure that we are expanding and have a pool. So for example, this employer, that I was talking about several months ago, it's not that they were saying we can't, hire somebody who's white. It wasn't that. It was that they wanted somebody who was, they wanted to make sure that their pool was inclusive enough. It is a very delicate thing. And in the diversity circles, you've got people on both sides of that aisle. There's a lot of debate on it. There's no one way, no one answer. I'm just giving a lens, but there's nothing that says this is the way we should do it. And again, it's evolving. Scott brings up a really great point. This is part of that conversation. And we're all sort of learning as we go to try to be as respectful as possible to everybody. There's, there's different ways to look at it. So.
yeah.
And what I wanted to say, Will, in relations to about handling it in today's time, you'll see a lot of it, because I know I do it, but I also see it. When you look at their position description at the very bottom, it normally have capabilities. Can you lift 10 pounds? Can you walk 2 miles? Can you, different physical things the job requires. And if you are not able to do that, it then asks, do you need accommodations, or what accommodations do you need? That's how we find out whether or not there's something going on that we need to accommodate.
That's right.
But it's to get you to talk, to give us the information, not us point blank being direct. Can you walk? Can you run? That kind of thing.
Yeah, it's actually, it's called, to Sonia's point, it's called a reasonable accommodation. Right. So if you need one, the only way that an employer is going to know is if either you proactively share it or they ask, which again is dicey because then you're sharing information. And so Ty says, what about HIPAA? Does that cover specific conditions? I'm not a HIPAA expert. I couldn't even touch that question. I don't know if Sonia or Vern in HR, if you know, if you're HIPAA people. But I don't
when
know.
it comes to HIPAA, you got to protect the employee's information. You can't talk about it. I've gone through many certifications. One of my companies that I work for recently, the entire company had to be HIPAA certified because, we had healthcare in our background. So you're going to run across stuff. And you do have to protect the data. There are some companies where if an employee has a medical situation, they'll let someone in HR know, but they won't tell their own manager. But HR could tell the manager, your person has a medical accommodation. So this is what we need to do. You talk to them about the setup for, you know, to accommodate them, but you don't give details about what their health issue is. I mean, that's just how sensitive it is in today's work environment on the HIPAA.
Kimberly? Well, Kimberly had her hand up.
Oh,
I
sorry.
was just gonna add to that real quick as far as the HIPAA situation. And Sonia and Vern, I'm learning and development, but I'm under the HR umbrella. So that's why I'm kind of like nod my head a lot on a lot of the stuff, because I've trained a lot on HIPAA. Where it's become dicey is with the introduction of COVID-19. It's become very interesting because there's some information you have to know, but it still has to be protected. To Sonia's point, an employee, the only person in that company that may know there's a situation with that employee is someone in HR. It differs a little bit if it's a company that has to adhere to DOT regulations, OSHA, and so forth. That differs a little bit. But to your, I guess your initial question as far as HIPAA, the premise of HIPAA is to protect the employee's medical information, no matter what. People can be terminated as a result of sharing someone's information. Now, if the employee decides they want to tell everybody, that's different. But if that employee shares that with someone in HR, I cannot, we cannot say anything. That's a violation. So, but with COVID-19, that's really made things a little dicey, but there's still a level of protection.
Thanks for that insight, Kimberly. That's great. Really appreciate that.
And
We have so much talent on this call, you know, people from diverse backgrounds and has all kinds of skills, so we're grateful for that. And it's just to step back back to a couple questions from our earlier chat. Joan asked, what is a positive way to answer why am I leaving my current position? And Ty said, how would you refrain leaving a specific job? So I think it's a similar kind of a thing. Vern, do you want to just go ahead and tackle that?
Sure. I mean, there could be a number of reasons why you're leaving your previous employer. But obviously, you're on mute, Joan. Joan, you're on mute.
I really and truly dislike it, and they've turned me down for remote, and the building it's in is a disaster area. I mean, it will be COVID central once people finally get through and get in it again.
Okay, so in other words, that's the reason that you want to leave your current employer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you don't criticize a federal building that has structural problems, mold, you know, things, a ventilation system that doesn't work. You know, you come across as being a whiner, but it's really not a healthy building to work in.
No.
And they've been cleaning up the mess since June, and they still haven't gotten it cleaned up.
Yeah. Yeah, so this might also relate to the honesty question, right? That we had earlier.
Right. And the thing is, you want to be positive, but there is no way they could triple my salary that I'm going in there and I'm healthy. I want to stay that way.
Yeah, I understand. And I know people have very, very strong feelings about that, you know, in terms of what's going on in the world today. But a typical answer to that question is, you know, you've reached the maximum and there's no room for promotion at the current location that you're at, and you're looking to further your career. You believe you've got, you know, skills and abilities that you know, are better suited to, you know, the new company, and you're looking to advance your career. Those are some of the typical answers.
I mean, look, right now, it to me, it's perfectly acceptable to say that you're looking because you have health concerns around working in an office. There are plenty of people who have that concern regardless of it being a federal building. They just don't feel safe working around other people. And you could easily say that right now.
Okay, that sounds good, because I certainly didn't want to go through the list of what was wrong with that
No.
building.
No.
No. Be very
You don't
generic
need
about
to. You don't need to. You can just make a general statement around, the conditions, the environment in which I'm working is, I don't feel is conducive to my overall health going forward.
Yeah.
And I really, I need to find a good employer who can use my skills
Right.
and be confident that I'm in a safe and
Exactly. In fact, Vern, even just the way you phrase that, that's a really good way to frame any reason for leaving. That goes back into the whole not being so overly honest that you're sharing all the detail. I don't care what the situation was. Most understand this. If you've left a job, right, there's usually a reason for it. There's a reason that often has some sort of emotional affect to it. Okay. Strip the emotion away from it. Do not get into detail about whatever it is. Well, this happened, that happened, and I can't believe, no. You come up with a nice overarching 1 sentence, 2 sentence kind of thing that frames it up nicely, speaks aspirationally, just like Vern said. And by the way, all these calls are being recorded and you can find them on my website. I want to make sure you guys have this, because this call in particular, I think, has some richness to it that you guys may want to follow up again. So if you guys go to purposefulhire.com, I'm going to show you where it is. So you go to my website, and if you go to the Hire Moment Mastermind tab, scroll down here, and you'll see all of the recordings all the way back until from August of 2020 when we first started this. Okay, so you can go back and listen to whatever you want, but I'll be putting this up here shortly. But really reframe how your reasons for leaving, something that's nice and tight, and also speaks to kind of going forward.
And doesn't sound negative, because because I requested full-time remote, they're not going to do it. And so therefore.
Yeah. And by the way, Joan, do you know how many people now? Oh, I don't know if I brought this up. But I did a poll. I did a LinkedIn, my first ever LinkedIn poll. You know how people are doing that these days? I did a LinkedIn poll, I don't know, maybe it was like a month ago or so. And I asked people, I said, how important is remote work to your job search, working remotely to your job search? And I gave three options. Number one, very important. It's a non-negotiable. Second response was, it's important, but I'm flexible. Basically, I'm open. I prefer remote, but I'm open to hybrid. And then the third one is I want to be in the office. I'd have to look it up exactly, but it was something like, 41% said of respondents. Oh, I got 360 responses or something. Okay, so 41%, I think, said non-negotiable. Joan, literally, they will not accept a job unless it's 100% remote. Another 48% said I prefer 100% remote, but I'm open to hybrid. And then only like 11% said they want to be in the office. So basically it was something like 88% or 89, whatever it was, 89% actually want to go for full remote, which is disrupting the entire workforce. I mean, HR people are going just nuts about this. They're nuts because they don't know what to do. But my point is that because of that, what you're saying actually fits with the market now. So you can say, I actually am looking for a remote opportunity because I feel unsafe in the office. They'll totally get it because everybody's saying it. Okay. So it doesn't have to be specific.
Not go into the building collapsing and okay.
No, you don't have to say any of that.
Yeah.
At all.
But that's something else. I've been looking at these advertisements and they say remote, but some of them say that they want the remote close to their office. And to me, that's an indication that when the COVID finally leaves us, they're going to want those people
yes
back
and
in
no.
the office.
Yes and no. I've talked to employers about this. You're right. Sometimes it's true. You're right. Sometimes it's not about that. Sometimes it's simply that the employer says, look, you can work remotely, but once or twice or 3 times a year or whatever, we want you to come in the office for some whatever team building or something like that. They want you to be able to come in the office if needed, but not that you have to work there. So I will tell you there are employers who are looking for that too.
Yeah.
I'd fly in from wherever.
Right,
that's-
and I understand, and so that, I get it, and some people are okay with that. I talked to an employer recently who said that, and she said, but of course it'd have to be on your dime, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But yes, some people are doing that, but yes, others are more because they want to just see you. And yes, and there are some others who are like, yeah, once everything's over, we do want you, full time. So every employer is different.
Can you bring that up during the interview?
Sure, nothing wrong with that. Yeah, I
Mhm.
wouldn't make it your first question.
No,
But
yeah.
as you're
No.
talking about culture and this and that, you can say, hey, I'm just curious around your flexibility with remote work. Can I ask it, do you need me to come in the office at certain points? Or whatever, just tell me your thinking on remote work now and in the future.
Yeah, but to Shira's point, have the interview, see if the interview goes well, if you like the position, if things, as you get into the process, if things are going well, then then that becomes important for you to ask.
But not in the initial interview, like you don't ask about benefits in the initial interview.
Yeah,
Right.
by the way, unless it's a make or breaker for you. If you do not want to ever come in the office again, and that's a make or breaker, you've got to address that literally right up front.
Right away.
The first
Yeah,
email, say, look,
Yeah.
I noticed you mentioned remote, but you also said you want someone local. I need to tell you, I'm one of those people that I want full-time remote. Are you going to have a requirement for me to ever come in the office? If so, I'm not your person.
Yeah, don't
Okay.
waste your time. Don't waste your time and their time.
Now, only if
Yeah.
it's a make or breaker should you bring it up.
Okay.
Okay, cool. All right, so now other questions. We've spent the whole time on these three. Anybody have a different question that they'd like to bring up?
Is it a good idea on your resume to put the job title that you're applying for right beneath your name? So when they look at it, they see Ty Smith, customer service rep. Is that good or bad?
It is wonderful. I always recommend it. It doesn't have to necessarily be, the specific, like, I don't know, there's some funky title that they use, but it should be either the same title or something extremely similar. Because when a person's looking at your resume, it's like an advertising document. If you do not put a career title there, and this is my opinion as a resume writer, okay? If you do not put your title there, you're leaving them to guess what kind of job you're looking for. You're leaving them to guess whether or not you're actually qualified for this. So actually saying, in your case in particular, Ty, because I know that is what you want to do as customer service rep, that maybe even just be a generic title for you, because I think most of your jobs are probably going to have that. But for sure, I would absolutely put that there.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I have a quick question. Good morning, everyone. I'm so sorry. I'm not I'm on an iPad that doesn't have my name on it. This is Melanie Morcell. I know all of you, and Shira, I had to get on and listen to you this morning. Real quick, I am employed. I had a great review, unfortunately too great, because now they want me to relocate across the country to Los Angeles. So now I'm here I am. I'm on such unfamiliar territory. So here's my quick question. I've been to so many of yours when I was unemployed last time. So this is all terrific. LinkedIn. I set up filters on LinkedIn for certain positions, titles, et cetera, and I'm getting all these alerts. How do I know that they're truly current positions? Because sometimes it'll say in the past 24 hours, then when I go to open it, it says over 30 days or whatever. How do recruiters use that LinkedIn career search engine? Any quick tips? I don't want to keep the group, but-
Okay. So I'm going to say two things about that. First of all, typically people will post a job for 30 days and then they will re-up it if they have not found the right person. Okay. So if it's a job on LinkedIn, there's a very good likelihood the job is still technically open.
Mhm,
Technically open.
mhm.
That doesn't mean to say that it's really open. What I mean by that is they could have already found the person. The job happens to still be posted because they haven't made an offer, but they're like in final level interviews or whatever, they're down the road. So the reality is they've actually closed it, but they haven't formally taken it off the site.
Mhm,
And the other thing
mhm.
too is about that, it's an administrative function. In other words, somebody on the HR team has to be responsible for remembering to go to the site and pull it down. And they're so busy, they've totally forgotten about it. And it's just sort of out there. Okay. But beyond that, Melanie, and I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. And I wish that I could be, I mean, I know I'm looking at your eyes, but I really wish that I could get right up here. Okay.
Me too.
Please, 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 please do not focus your job search 100% on the job boards. Please don't do that. Okay. Job boards, LinkedIn job board, Indeed, Career Builder, Trade. I don't care what it is. Those only work 10% of the time because you are competing with everybody and their first cousin once removed. I mean, truly, it is not the way to do job searches anymore. You have got to ramp up your networking. Now, LinkedIn's database, the search bar, absolutely use that all up and down. I have a whole training on that. In fact, I'd recommend you go back to my website. Go to my website, and there's a job. I'll pull it up right here. This is very important training. It's actually 2-hour training that I did.
Good.
And go to the job seeker tab, go to Shira Speaks to Job Seekers, go down to here, using LinkedIn like a pro. Okay. 2 hours on branding yourself and also on how to use the search features. Hugely important. And also the other one below it, accessing the hidden job market. That's all about networking. Okay. So it's about, I have this thing called the family tree networking, and your twins and your siblings and your first cousins, your second cousins, the whole
Yeah,
thing.
I took that one, but I need to hear it again.
Good. Yeah, here's the
Perfect.
video.
Is that what it's titled?
Yeah, accessing the hidden job market, and then use those two are really great for what you're talking about.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, because otherwise you have so much competition. But when you show up before your resume and somebody knows you, likes you, trusts you, and recommends you, refers you, whatever, that's just the way it goes. So that's why I'm like, yeah, LinkedIn, whatever, but I wouldn't,
No, thank you. I needed to hear that. Oh my goodness.
Good.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone.
You're welcome.
Morning.
Great.
I have another question if we got a minute. I'm employed full-time. This is my AWS day, so I'm talking to you. What's an effective way to have a sneaky job search? Does that make sense?
You mean a confidential job search?
They love me where I am. I just don't love them in their building.
To do a confidential job search?
Yes.
Yeah. So look, first of all, nothing's ever 100% confidential because you never know. Okay. Like it just is, it is what it is. One thing you can do is, there's different things you can do, but on LinkedIn, for example, you can, if you are looking for people, like let's say you're networking with people, you can turn off the feature that shows that you've been looking at somebody, if that makes any sense. You know how sometimes you could, I don't know if you know this about LinkedIn, but if somebody has the premium level, they can see who's been looking at them. So if you're actually doing a search on LinkedIn and you're looking at people, there's a visibility. I'll bring this up. I know this sounds very technical, but it's actually helpful to know. So I'm going to bring this up right now and show you. Okay, so if you go to LinkedIn and you go to the Me button and then go to settings and privacy. Remember, this is being recorded, so you can watch this again. And then you go to visibility. Okay, and then first one says profile viewing options. Now I'm in what's called private mode. So it's simply because I do a lot of searching and I do trainings and whatever. People don't need to know that I'm looking at them randomly. But normally, if you're Joan, if you are not doing a confidential search, if you are an open job seeker, maybe others of you on this call, I would actually say, show it as who you are, because you want people to see who you are. You want people to look at you back. You know, you've looked at them, you want them to look at you back. But Joan, in your case, I would go to anonymous. Okay. That's one small little way that you can keep things confidential in terms of if you're searching.
Do you have to have premium to have that feature?
No. That's for everybody. What I just showed you is for everybody.
So what you're saying, Shira, is if I look someone up and I have it on private mode, they can't see that I looked them up.
Correct.
Perfect. Because I was doing it yesterday and it was interesting. I had that.
And if I looked at a firm
that I looked up, look at my profile.
Correct. If you change it to the anonymous, they cannot see who you are.
Excellent. That's huge. Thank you.
Oh, that's
yeah.
Yeah. So that's I think one of the key ways if you're doing your networking and that kind of thing. You know, beyond that, look, if you're talking to people, you need to let people know you're doing a confidential job search, okay? Especially anybody who is remotely connected to your place of employment. So like, I'm really just emphasize that it's a confidential search. Please, please refrain from sharing this with my boss or, my coworkers or that kind of thing. And, beyond that, it's not like, you can, I've seen once in a blue moon, I've seen somebody who actually doesn't list the name of their employer and they'll just say confidential. That's a little bit out there. I've seen it done a few times. Once in particular, I remember it. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. But of course, then the employer doesn't know where you work and it's hard for them to vet you. So you could, Joan, technically replace the word, your name of your employer with the word confidential.
I did.
Okay, you did. You can. It's a little tricky for the recruiter because they want to know where you work, right? They want to know what you do. They want to know, like, your background. You could, if you're really trying to be extra about it, but from recruiter's lens, we prefer to see the name of the employer.
What it is I switched over to a new contract and I've worked there 2 months
But
now.
you know what you can do? Are you in the government contracting world?
Yeah.
Okay, then if that's the case, I would just say government contractor in parentheses confidential. That actually is okay, because then at least
Okay,
they know what
wonderful.
sector you're from. They don't have to know the name of the company. That's okay.
Oh, that's what yeah, because I would think a recruiter would be sophisticated enough they wouldn't contact my employer.
No, they don't.
But you have a lot of amateur government contracting firms, and I don't need them contacting my current employer right now.
No, they won't do. People know enough. The worst thing that'll happen, which is not whatever great, but somebody might call a colleague or something, but people know enough. Any employer worth their salt is not going to randomly call your supervisor. They just don't do that. It's not nice. It's just you don't do that. In fact, if anything, they would ask you in references, may we call your current employer, which you can absolutely say no if you're doing a confidential search. So no, I don't see that.
And I did put remote in on LinkedIn. So, okay. Thank you. I feel so much better because, I'm not trying to lie or anything, but I'm just quietly trying to get out of here.
I get it.
Well, the other thing, Joan, that, whenever you're in the job search and you're faced with decisions, whether to relocate or whatever the decisions are, my advice to every client that I work with is, at the end of the day, you need to do what you believe is in your best interest, your family's best interest, your career's best interest. And, those can be conflicting sometimes, but at the end of the day, you need to make a decision. And so you're very clear about the healthy environments you want to work in. And so stick to your guns and you make sure that happens some way, somehow.
All right, so with that, I actually have a hard stop at 10:30, so I'm going to need to wrap up here and then shift to, for anybody who would like to stay on for the prayer call, you are certainly welcome to do that. I'll be having that now. For everyone else, we look forward to seeing you next week at our next session. And you know what, if you have any questions that you'd like to post to me in advance, feel free to email them to me. I used to use a Google Sheet, but if you would like to just shoot me an email, I'll put my email in the chat box here. Give me 1 second. Here we go. Okay. Oh, and also, so some of you know this, that I have another community service group called Boomerworks. If you are 50 plus and are looking to get into self-employment or know somebody who is, not that we discriminate, anybody, all ages are welcome, but we target folks over 50. Feel free to check us out at boomerworks.org. We have twice monthly programs, an educational program, and a peer networking group, and we would love to have you. Okay, so with that, wish everybody a blessed week and a blessed weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.